such sacrifices or such trade-offs to be made. As with everything in life, I think it's important to count the cost before you enter into anything, especially parenthood. At least be honest with yourself about what that's going to mean in terms of things that will need to be given up. And I think there are obviously sacrifices on the other side as well. I think it's naive to tell ourselves that we're not, that especially when both parents are working full-time, that we're not sacrificing certain things in our family life. There are things that I did before I started working full-time that I don't do now, like being a room mom at kids' school, or doing day trips to the zoo or to the museum. Some of those tasks my husband has picked up, and we've switched roles to a certain extent. Some of them have just fallen by the wayside. About 2 weeks ago, my 10-year-old had her 5th grade choir concert. And I had a commitment here on campus that I couldn't get out of. And so I missed it. That doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen now and then. And so inevitably, there are those kind of sacrifices to my family as well. And because of that, and knowing the inevitability of those sacrifices, it was important to me when I chose to start working full-time again, that I choose to do something that I feel is very significant, that I feel is worth those sacrifices, that I can look my kids in the eye and say, okay, I'm not going to be here tonight, and this is why. And there's some understanding that what I'm doing is significant and important. So I'm just looking forward to what the rest of you had to share, so I'll be quiet now. So let's go again.
I think it's a great opportunity because I can't tell you the number of times my husband and I sat with our friends with a couple glasses of wine and talked about all of these issues. And so it's just great to be with all of you guys and talk about it now. When I had my 3rd child, we had just moved to DC, and I remember I was really in the weeds. You know, I was like, everybody was sick, somebody missed, they were, nobody was sleeping. One of those things I felt like we were eating cereal for dinner all the time. It was just sort of a tough time, and I met this woman who had 6 kids, which to me was an inconceivable number at that time. And she always seemed very put together, house it was neat, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to her, how do you do that? And she said, well, I just have decided that it's better if life isn't a surprise every day. She said, I think it's great, if we don't get to 6 o'clock and say, dinner, we have to have dinner tonight. Or we don't get to Friday and say, look at all that laundry. We need clean clothes. And if I have a plan, life is much more smooth. And I think that's a good way to think about this issue as well. Most of you here in this room will sometime in the next 15 or 20 years get married and have children. Even if you don't, you'll have other relationships, parents, friends, extended family, whatever, that you'll want to spend time on as opposed to your career. And a way to think about that, just to prove that point, well, let me say the other thing is that you're all very achievement focused at this point. You wouldn't be here if you weren't, right? You've achieved a lot in high school, you're achieving a lot right now. You're probably at the most unencumbered point in your life. And so there's a real bias towards thinking about your career. And to prove that, I'll tell you, what are they going to ask you on your graduation day? They're going to say, what are you going to do? You're not going to say, who are you going to marry? Right? Bizarre. The other thing is, think about this. What's the most transgressive thing that any of you could do when you're 23? Have a baby and get married. My hero, Katie Martinson, can tell you that. In any event, so I'd like to shift that balance just a little bit. Plant a seed in your mind and say, maybe a little bit of that focus should be thinking about planning now for that family that you'll someday have, for those people someday who will love and depend on you. And the other main point I would say is that I think it belittles women to implicitly or explicitly denigrate the work most of them have done across most of the world for most of history, which is raise a family and make a home. So that's sort of the big issues. In terms of practicalities, like how did we do it? A couple different things. First of all, so my husband and I went to Princeton together. We didn't get married, we went to law school together as well. And we got married in law school. And I would say that's when we kind of grew up a little bit. We had to start making trade-offs. So we both were in line for clerkships and those kind of things. And we decided against that, just in terms of the practicalities of what our family life was going to look like. We took jobs based on family friendliness. We looked in New York and San Francisco. And if you know anything about the legal market in New York, and if you know anything about San Francisco, you'll know why we ended up out there. I had 6 months of maternity leave in 1994, which was, I would have been back to work in probably 3 weeks in New York. So we made those kind of trade-offs. We made those kind of choices. We were very explicit about it, and we thought about it and talked about it a lot. And it was hard to make those trade-offs because you've really never had to do that. If there's an achievement out there, you all take it, right? If you can do it, you go for it. And then to say that I'm going to put that on the back burner, and my family, these other people, are now going to be important, and I'm going to make that sacrifice, is a difficult one to do. But by far, definitely worth it. We would never turn back on those things. We also talked early and often about all these issues. Regardless, and we're all going to have different arrangements and different times in our life where we've done different things. And I would say that the main thing is that we just talk about it a lot. And obviously it's not just women in the relationship, in the marriage, it's the men as well. None of us here, I think, lived in a time where our husbands come home and snap open paper and never change a diaper. I mean, that just doesn't exist anymore, obviously, for you all, I don't think. For us, certainly not. And so because of that, it's not just my career that we've adjusted. It's my husband's career as well. He's at a firm now that doesn't have the same kind. It's a great firm, but he left his old firm because the travel requirements and the hourly commitment was just too much. Now he's still a lawyer, so he still gets home. He still gets home later than our friends who are academics or whatever. I mean, there's still all sorts of trade-offs that we make. But the point is that that's something that's always kind of front and center for us. Again, what other people have said too is that there's no real one way to do this. We have a million friends who do this in a million different ways, whether they both work part-time, whether they work full-time but have help at home, whatever it is. It's a prudential decision that you make in the context of your family. But I would just say that while you're making those decisions, remember that the cultural bias is to try to fit your family into your career. And I would say that flip it around and try to fit your career into your family and start thinking about that now. And also kind of get going on it now, in your lives right now. Think about who you want to marry. I just would say don't mess around. I can think of really close friends of mine who spent their 20s with guys they were never going to marry. And you know what I mean? And now I have other friends who are in their mid-30s who would love to have kids and aren't in that position right now for whatever reason. So I would say, again, put this kind of issue front and center in your life, because even if it doesn't seem important, because the world you live in is biased in a different direction, keep it in the back of your mind and think about it. Overall, I would say that the main themes I would say would be that family life is much more important than you think. It will be much more constitutive of your happiness than you think right now. It offers lots of opportunities for creativity, emotional growth, character development. G.K. Chesterton once said, why do people think it's a large job for women to teach other people's children about the rule of three, and instead think it's a small job to teach their own children about the universe? I think that's very true. We are forming little souls. We're doing a lot of them, and it's a really great job, but it has a lot of drudgery, and so does being a lawyer. There's no job out there that's going to be perfect. It's all hard work. And finally, I would say that whatever you do, make sure you position yourself in a real community. And right now today, I have 6 people at home who are taking my children one place or another. My husband is home early. Only one of those people is Paige. She's the babysitter of our neighbor. She's